Kate Morrison checked the neural interface connections one last time before entering the transport ship, and the small device behind her ear hummed softly as it synchronized with her brainwaves, and she felt the familiar presence of her two dragons. Reaching out through the link, and Ember sent waves of excited energy, while Frost projected calm readiness, and both creatures were secured in the cargo bay of the ship, waiting for their journey to begin. The officer at the boarding gate looked at her papers and then at her face with obvious concern, and he was young and probably had never seen combat outside of training simulations, and his hands shook slightly as he handed back her identification. "You are really going through with this, ma'am. And the Carinth have never lost a ritual duel in recorded history. And are you sure about this?" Kate took her papers and smiled at him with more confidence than she felt inside. "Someone has to go, and I volunteered. And besides, I am not going alone." The officer glanced toward the cargo bay where the two massive shapes were visible through the transparent sections, and he swallowed hard and nodded and stepped aside to let her pass. And Kate walked down the corridor toward her seat in the passenger section, and she could feel dozens of eyes watching her as she moved, and some looked at her with respect, while others clearly thought she was walking to her death. She found her assigned seat and settled in for the 3-hour journey to the Carinth homeworld, and the seat was uncomfortable and standard military issue and designed for function rather than comfort. And Kate closed her eyes and reached out through the neural link to check on her dragons, and Ember was pacing in the cargo bay, and his scales gleaming red even in the dim light, and Frost lay coiled and conserving energy like always, and both dragons sent reassurance back to her through the bond. The ship lifted off with a slight shudder, and Kate felt her stomach drop as they accelerated through the atmosphere, and within minutes they had left Earth behind, and the blue marble of home grew smaller in the viewport beside her seat, and she wondered if she would ever see it again. A woman sitting across the aisle leaned forward and spoke in a hushed voice. "I am Linda Chen, and I work in the diplomatic corps, and I wanted to thank you for what you are doing, and most people do not understand how important this duel is for humanity." Kate opened her eyes and looked at the woman, and Linda was in her 40s with gray streaks in her dark hair and worry lines around her eyes. "I understand the stakes, and if I lose, then the Carinth get the entire Vega sector, and that is 12 colonized worlds and millions of human lives under alien rule." Linda nodded slowly, and her expression was grave. "More than that, and if you lose, it sets a precedent, and other species will challenge us to ritual combat knowing we cannot win, and humanity will lose territory across the galaxy, and we will be pushed back to our core systems, and some in the government think we should have refused the challenge entirely." Kate shook her head firmly. Refusing would have been worse, and it would have shown weakness, and the Galactic Council would have seen us as cowards. And at least this way we have a chance, and a small chance is better than no chance. The two women sat in silence for a while, and the ship hummed around them as it traveled through space toward the Carinth homeworld. And Kate could feel the anxiety building in her chest, but she pushed it down and focused on her breathing and on the steady presence of her dragons in her mind. Linda spoke again after several minutes. "How did you end up with dragons? And I thought the genetic engineering program was shut down after the protests." Kate smiled slightly at the memory. "It was shut down officially, but some of us kept working in private labs, and we believed the technology was too valuable to abandon, and I was part of the original research team, and I helped design the neural interface that allows human and dragon minds to connect. And when Ember and Frost hatched, I was the first person they saw, and we bonded immediately. And they are loyal to you. More than loyal, and we are connected on a level most people cannot understand, and I feel what they feel, and they know my thoughts before I speak them, and we move together like one organism with 3 bodies, and that is our advantage in this duel." Linda looked impressed, and also slightly disturbed by the concept. "The Carinth do not know what they are facing. No, they do not. And they think I am just a human woman with 2 trained animals, and they do not understand that we are something entirely new, and something the galaxy has never seen before." The ship began its descent toward the Carinth homeworld several hours later, and Kate woke from a light sleep and looked out the viewport at the planet below. And it was mostly red and orange, with vast deserts and rocky mountain ranges, and the Carinth had evolved in harsh conditions, and it showed in their architecture and their culture. The landing was smooth and the ship touched down on a massive platform surrounded by towering structures made of dark stone, and Kate could see Carinth warriors everywhere and their reptilian forms moving with predatory grace. And they watched the human ship with obvious interest and some with barely concealed hostility. Kate stood and made her way to the cargo bay, and other passengers gave her space and some whispered prayers for her safety, and she appreciated the sentiment even though she had never been particularly religious. The cargo bay doors opened with a hiss of hydraulics, and Ember and Frost emerged into the alien sunlight, and both dragons stretched their wings, and Ember roared his challenge to the sky, while Frost remained silent and observant, and the Carinth warriors nearby stepped back instinctively, and their hands moving toward weapons before. They remembered this was a diplomatic arrival. Kate walked between her dragons and placed a hand on each of their scaled sides, and she sent calm thoughts through the neural link, and both creatures settled down, though their eyes remained alert and watchful. A delegation of Carinth officials approached, and the leader was tall even by their species standards, and his scales were darker than the others, and marked with ritual scars that indicated high rank. And he stopped several meters away and studied Kate and her dragons with unreadable eyes. "I am Zrathok and commander of the Carinth War Council, and you are the human champion." Kate met his gaze without flinching. "I am Kate Morrison, and these are Ember and Frost, and we accept your challenge." Zrathok clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement or contempt. "You are smaller than I expected, and your beasts are impressive, but size alone does not win battles, and we shall see tomorrow if you have the courage to face our warriors, tomorrow, and I thought the duel was today." Zrathok gestured toward the setting sun. "Our traditions require one night of rest before ritual combat, and you will have quarters prepared, and your beasts will be housed in our stables." Kate shook her head firmly. "Dragons stay with me, and we do not separate." The Carinth commander studied her for a long moment and then nodded slowly. "As you wish, and follow me, and I will show you to your chambers." Kate walked beside Zrathok through the alien city, and Ember and Frost followed close behind, and she could feel curious eyes watching from every window and doorway. And the Carinth had never seen dragons before, and they whispered among themselves as the strange procession passed. The quarters were spacious and built of the same dark stone as everything else on this world, and there was a large central room with sleeping platforms and a separate area that could accommodate the dragons, and Kate released Ember and Frost from the neural link temporarily, so they could rest properly. She stood at the window and looked out over the alien landscape, and tomorrow she would fight for the future of humanity, and tomorrow she would prove that humans brought more to the galaxy than just their technology and their ambition, and tomorrow the Carinth would learn that underestimating Earth was a fatal mistake. Kate Morrison smiled grimly in the fading light, and she was ready. The morning sun rose over the Carinth homeworld and painted the sky in shades of orange and deep red, and Kate woke to find both dragons already awake and watching her with glowing eyes, and she felt their anticipation through the neural link, and today was the day that would determine everything. She ate a simple breakfast of ration bars she had brought from Earth, and the Carinth had offered food, but she did not trust it, and could not risk getting sick before the most important fight of her life. And Ember paced the room while Frost remained perfectly still, and both dragons were processing the upcoming battle in their own ways. A knock on the door echoed through the chamber, and Kate opened it to find a young Carinth female standing there, and her scales were lighter than the warriors Kate had seen and marked with scholarly symbols, rather than battle scars. "I am Thessala, and I serve as translator and observer for the War Council, and I have been sent to escort you to the arena, and the duel begins at midday." Kate nodded and checked her clothing one final time, and she wore simple combat attire and flexible, and allowing full range of motion and no armor as the rules required, and her only equipment was the neural interface. Device behind her ear lead the way. They walked through winding corridors carved from solid rock, and the walls were decorated with murals showing famous Carinth victories and countless battles where their warriors had triumphed over enemies from across the galaxy. And Kate noticed that every mural showed individual combat and warriors fighting alone, and the Carinth culture valued personal strength above all else. Thessala noticed Kate studying the artwork and spoke quietly. "These murals are thousands of years old, and each depicts a champion who brought glory to our people through ritual combat, and your name could join them if you survive." And though I confess I do not believe that is likely. Kate glanced at the younger alien. You do not think I can win? Thessala hesitated and then spoke more honestly than was probably wise. I think you are brave, and I think your bonded creatures are magnificent, but I have watched our warriors train since I was a hatchling, and they are bred for combat, and they know nothing but war and honor through battle, and forgive me, but you seem too small and too fragile to face them. Kate smiled without humor. Appearance can be deceiving, and some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy are small and fragile-looking, and humans learned long ago not to judge by size alone. They emerged into bright sunlight, and the arena stretched before them, and it was massive and carved from a natural crater in the landscape, and thousands of spectators filled the seats, and representatives from dozens of alien species had come to witness the duel. And Kate could see humans in the crowd too, and diplomats and military observers who had traveled here to watch her fight. The arena floor was flat and covered in red sand, and there were no obstacles and no cover and nowhere to hide, and it was designed for pure combat and nothing else. And Zrathok stood in the center and, waiting beside 3 other Caranth warriors, who would be her opponents. Kate walked forward, and Ember and Frost flanked her on either side, and their footsteps left prints in the sand, and the crowd grew quiet as they approached, and the silence was heavy with expectation and doubt. Zrathok raised his arms, and his voice carried across the arena through speakers embedded in the stone walls. We are gathered to witness ritual combat between humanity and the Caranth over territorial rights to the Vega sector, and the human champion Kate Morrison has accepted our challenge, and she will face 3 of our finest warriors, and the rules are ancient and binding, and no weapons and no armor and only natural abilities. And combat continues until one side cannot fight, or until sunset, and may honor guide us all. Kate felt the neural link activate fully, and Ember and Frost connected with her mind, and suddenly she was not just herself anymore, and she could see through their eyes and feel their strength, and their thoughts merged with hers in perfect harmony. And this was what the Caranth did not understand, and this was the secret that would change everything. The 3 Caranth warriors spread out, and each was enormous and covered in thick armored scales, and their claws extended and ready, and they had fought hundreds of battles and never lost, and their confidence showed in every movement. The center warrior was largest, and he would be the primary attacker, and the other 2 would flank and support, and it was a standard formation and effective against any individual opponent. But Kate was not an individual opponent. The gong sounded, and the duel began. The center Caranth charged immediately, and his bulk moving with surprising speed, and sand sprayed from his feet, and he came at Kate like a living battering ram, and intending to end the fight quickly through overwhelming force. Kate did not move, and she stood perfectly still, and watched him come, and the crowd gasped, and thinking she had frozen in fear. Then Ember moved, and the red dragon launched into the air in his powerful wings, creating a blast of wind that scattered sand across the arena, and he climbed rapidly, and positioning himself above the charging warrior. The Caranth looked up and hesitated, and confused by this tactic, and that hesitation cost him precious seconds. Ember folded his wings and dropped like a meteor, and 2 tons of muscle and scale and genetically enhanced bone structure, and he struck the warrior from above and drove him face first into the sand, and the impact shook the ground, and the Caranth went down hard and stunned by the unexpected aerial assault. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations, and no one had expected this. The left flanking warrior recovered from his surprise and charged toward Kate, and thinking she was vulnerable now that one dragon was occupied, and he moved in a zigzag pattern and trying to be unpredictable. Frost met him head-on, and the blue dragon was faster than he looked, and he used his tail like a whip and struck. The warrior's legs and the Caranth stumbled, and Frost pressed the advantage and wrapped around him like a constrictor and squeezed with calculated force, and the warrior struggled but could not break free, and his armor protected him from being crushed, but he was completely immobilized. The 3rd warrior stopped and reassessed the situation, and both his companions were down in less than 30 seconds, and he looked at Kate with new respect and new fear. She spoke through the arena speakers, and her voice calm and measured. Your tactics assume individual combat, and you train your warriors to fight alone and to rely on personal strength and honor, and that works well against species who think the same way. But humans evolved differently. And we survived not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we learned to work together and to use tools and strategy and to adapt. The third warrior circled warily, and looking for an opening, Kate continued speaking. And partially, for his benefit and partially for the watching crowd, you asked for unarmed combat and you assumed that meant hand-to-hand fighting. But I never agreed to fight alone. And my dragons are not weapons, and they are not tools, and they are extensions of myself, and we are bonded through technology. Your species does not possess, and we think as one and fight as one. And that is the human way. The warrior lunged at her in desperation, overcoming caution. Kate sidestepped smoothly, and her movements, precise and economical, and she had trained in multiple martial arts and knew exactly how to read an opponent's body language. And as the Carinth passed, she struck 3 specific points on his spine, and targeting nerve clusters she had studied in Carinth anatomy texts. The warrior collapsed and temporarily paralyzed, and he would recover in a few hours, but the fight was over. The arena fell completely silent, and then chaos erupted as thousands of spectators began talking at once and arguing, and debating what they had just witnessed. Zrathok walked onto the sand, and his expression unreadable, and he stopped before Kate and studied her and the dragons and the 3 fallen warriors. You have won, and he said simply, and the Vega sector belongs to humanity. Kate released the neural link slightly and allowed Ember and Frost to relax, and both dragons moved to stand beside her. I hope this can be a beginning rather than an ending, and humanity seeks allies and not enemies. Zrathok was quiet for a long moment, and something shifted in his eyes. You have taught us something today, human, and you have shown us that there are ways of fighting we never considered, and perhaps there are things the Carinth can learn from. Earth Kate smiled. And this time it was genuine. And perhaps there are things humans can learn from the Carinth, and strength and honor are not weaknesses, and they simply need to be combined with strategy and adaptation. The crowd was still talking and still trying to understand what had happened, but Kate knew that this moment would be remembered, and humanity had proven itself in the arena, and proven that they belonged among the great powers of the galaxy. She looked up at the alien sky and thought of home, and of Earth, waiting for news of victory. The celebration in the human diplomatic quarters was subdued, and Kate had expected cheering and congratulations, but instead found worried faces and hushed conversations, and Ambassador Patricia Wells stood by the window and staring out at the Carinth city, and her shoulders were tense. We won, and Kate said as she entered, and Ember and Frost following close behind. And why does everyone look like we lost? Patricia turned, and her expression was grave. You won the duel, Kate. And that is true. But now we have a bigger problem. And the other species at the Galactic Council are not happy, and they are saying you cheated and that your dragons are weapons and not natural companions. And they want the results invalidated. Kate felt anger rise in her chest, but forced it down. The rules were clear, and no weapons and no armor and only natural abilities. And my bond with Ember and Frost is natural to me, and it is part of who I am. Patricia nodded, but her worry did not fade. I know that, and you know that, but the council is debating it now, and the Vrexen delegation is particularly vocal, and they are claiming that genetically engineered creatures should not be allowed in ritual combat, and they are afraid, Kate, and afraid that humans have found a loophole that changes everything. A man sitting at the conference table spoke up, and he was Commander Gregory Hunt from Earth Military Intelligence, and his face showed years of tactical thinking. They should be afraid. And what you demonstrated today changes the entire paradigm of galactic power, and every species that relies on ritual combat to settle disputes now has to reconsider their strategies, and the Vrexen have built their entire empire on the backs of their champion fighters, and if other species can use bonded creatures like you did, then the Vrexen lose their advantage. Kate sat down heavily, and suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline crash after the fight. So what happens now? Patricia pulled up a holographic display showing the Galactic Council chamber. The council will vote tomorrow on whether to uphold the results of your duel, and if they vote against us, then the Vega sector goes to the Carinth anyway, and all your effort will have been for nothing, and worse, it will set a precedent that humans cannot be trusted to follow the spirit of the rules. Ember rumbled low in his throat, and Kate reached out to calm him through the neural link. and Frost remained still, but she could feel his anger simmering beneath the surface. There has to be something we can do. Gregory leaned forward and his eyes sharp. There is, and you need to speak to the council and explain what you did, and make them understand that this is not cheating, but evolution, and humanity has always adapted and changed and created new things, and that is our strength. And if they cannot accept that, then they are the ones clinging to outdated traditions. Patricia looked uncertain, but nodded slowly. It is risky. And if you say the wrong thing, you could make the situation worse, but Gregory is right, and you are the only one who can explain the bond you share with your dragons and make them understand. Kate stood, and determination replacing exhaustion. When do I speak? Tomorrow morning, and before the vote, and you will have 15 minutes to address the full council and make them count. The next morning, Kate stood before the assembled representatives of 43 different species, and the Galactic Council chamber was enormous and circular and designed to give every species equal standing, and each delegation sat in their designated area, and many of the faces watching her were openly hostile. The council speaker was a Velastran named Carthon, and his species was ancient and wise and often served as mediators in galactic disputes, and he gestured for Kate to approach the central platform. Kate Morrison of Earth, and you have been granted the opportunity to address this council regarding yesterday's ritual combat, and speak freely, but be warned that your words will be judged by all present. Kate walked to the center, and Ember and Frost were not allowed in the chamber, so she felt strangely alone without their presence in her mind, and she took a deep breath, and began. Honored delegates, and I stand before you as a human and as a champion, and as someone who has been accused of cheating, and I want to address those accusations directly and honestly. She paused, and letting her words settle, the Caranth challenged humanity to ritual combat under ancient rules, and no weapons and no armor, and only natural abilities, and I followed those rules exactly. And my dragons are not weapons, and they are living beings with their own thoughts and feelings and desires, and yes, they are genetically engineered, but that does not make them unnatural. A Vrexan delegate stood abruptly, and his massive form towering even in his seat. You created those creatures in a laboratory, and they exist only because you manipulated their genetics, and that is not natural. And that is technology masquerading as nature. Kate met his gaze without fear. By that logic, none of us are natural, and the Vrexan used genetic modifications to enhance your warriors and bones, strengthened beyond normal biology and muscles augmented with synthetic compounds, and should those modifications be considered unnatural, and should you be banned from ritual combat? The Vrexan delegate sat down, and his face showing anger, but no counter-argument. Kate continued and gaining confidence. The Thessians use cybernetic implants to enhance their neural processing, and the Cormath breathe an atmosphere that has been artificially maintained for 10,000 years, and the Velastran extend your lifespans through medical technology that did not exist in nature, and we all use technology to enhance what we are. And that is the nature of sentient life, and we grow, and we change, and we improve. Carthon spoke from his position as council speaker. Your argument has merit, young human, but there is a difference between personal enhancement and bringing other creatures into combat, and your dragons are separate beings. Kate shook her head. That is where you are wrong, honored speaker, and my dragons are not separate from me, and not in any meaningful way. And through neural interface technology, our minds are linked, and we think together and feel together and act together, and when I fight, they fight, and when they fight, I fight, and we are a single entity with 3 bodies, and that is what the Caranth did not understand, and that is what gave us victory. She gestured broadly at the assembled delegates. Every species here has something that makes them unique, and something that gives them an advantage, and the Caranth have their natural armor and their strength, and the Vrexan have their size and their enhanced warriors, and the Thessians have their speed and their cybernetic reflexes, and humanity has our ability to bond with other species, and to create partnerships that transcend normal boundaries, and that is our gift and our contribution to the galaxy. A small delegate from the Pixian Consortium spoke up, and her voice surprisingly strong for such a tiny being. But if we allow this, then any species could bring bonded creatures to ritual combat, and it changes everything we have known for millennia. Kate smiled. Yes, it does change things. And change is frightening, and I understand that. But change is also necessary, and ritual combat was created as an alternative to war and as a way to settle disputes without massive bloodshed. But over time it has become rigid and predictable, and species with natural advantages dominate, and species without. Those advantages are forced to submit or fight wars they cannot win. She paused and looked at each delegation. Humanity offers a different path, and we offer the possibility that any species, regardless of size or strength, can compete on equal terms if they are willing to adapt, and to create bonds and to work together. And is that not better than the current system, where might makes right and where the strong dominate the weak? The council chamber was silent, and delegates looking at each other and some nodding slowly while others still showed doubt. Carthon stood and his ancient face thoughtful. You speak with wisdom beyond your years, Kate Morrison, and you have given this council much to consider, and we will deliberate and vote on whether to uphold the results of your duel, and you may return to your quarters. Kate bowed respectfully and left the chamber, and her heart pounding, and she had done everything she could, and now the fate of the Vega sector, and perhaps the future of human expansion into the galaxy, rested in the hands of alien delegates who might not understand what she had tried to explain. She found Patricia and Gregory waiting outside. How did it go? Kate leaned against the wall and suddenly feeling the weight of everything. I told them the truth, and I explained the bond, and I made the case for change, and now we wait. Gregory nodded grimly. The vote will be close, and I have been counting delegates, and some species will vote with us and some against, and the deciding votes will come from the neutral parties and the ones who have no stake in the outcome. Patricia put a hand on Kate's shoulder. You did well. And regardless of what happens, you showed them that humanity will not back down, and that we will fight for our place in the galaxy, using every advantage we have. Kate thought about her dragons waiting back at the quarters, and thought about Earth and all the people depending on her, and she prayed that her words had been enough. The waiting was worse than the fighting, and Kate sat in her quarters and connected to Ember and Frost through the neural link, and drawing comfort from their steady presence, and the dragons sensed her anxiety and sent waves of calm reassurance, but even they could not completely ease her worry. 3 hours had passed since the council began deliberations, and still no word had come, and Patricia paced the room and checking her communication device every few minutes, and Gregory studied tactical maps as if preparing for the worst possible outcome. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Patricia opened the door to find Thessala standing there, and the young Carinth female looked nervous and glanced around before stepping inside quickly. I should not be here, and she said quietly, and if my superiors knew I was speaking with you, I would be punished, but I wanted you to know something. Kate stood and gestured for Thessala to sit. What is it? Thessala perched on the edge of a chair, and her tail wrapped around her legs in a gesture that suggested fear or uncertainty. Zrathok has been speaking to other delegates and arguing in your favor, and he told them that you fought with honor, and that you followed the rules as they were written, and he said the Carinth accept the result of the duel and will honor the outcome regardless of what the council decides. Kate felt surprise and warmth at this news. Why would he do that? And his people lost the Vega sector. Thessala's eyes showed something. That might have been admiration, because you taught him something, and he told the War Council that the Carinth have become arrogant, and that we assumed our way of fighting was the only way. And he said that humanity showed us the value of adaptation, and of working together, and he wants to establish a cultural exchange with Earth. Gregory looked up from his maps and his expression skeptical. Cultural exchange, and what does that mean exactly? Thessala turned to him. It means Carinth warriors would come to Earth to learn your methods, and human warriors would come to our world to learn ours. And it means our species would train together and share knowledge and perhaps fight together if the need arises. Patricia sat down slowly and processing this information. That would be unprecedented, and the Carinth have never allied with anyone. And you value independence above all else. Thessala nodded. That is true. But Zrathok believes the galaxy is changing, and that species who do not adapt will be left behind, and he sees humanity as the future, and as a partner worth having. Before anyone could respond, another chime sounded, and this time it was a formal summons, and the council had reached a decision, and Kate felt her stomach tighten, and this was the moment that would determine everything. They walked through the corridors toward the council chamber, and Ember and Frost following behind, and other delegates were converging from different directions, and some looked satisfied, while others appeared angry, and Kate could not tell which side had won. The chamber filled quickly, and Kate took her position in the center platform, and her dragons beside her, and Carthon stood, and the ancient Velastron's face revealing nothing. The Galactic Council has deliberated on the matter of ritual combat between humanity and the Carinth, and we have heard arguments from many perspectives and examined the ancient texts that govern such duels, and after careful consideration we have reached a decision. He paused, and the silence in the chamber was absolute. By a vote of 23 to 20, the Council has decided to uphold the results of the ritual combat, and the Vega sector is hereby recognized as human territory, and Kate Morrison is acknowledged as a legitimate champion who fought within the boundaries of established rules. Relief flooded through Kate, and she felt Ember and Frost respond to her emotions, and the dragons raised their heads proudly, and the human delegation erupted in quiet celebration. But Carthon was not finished speaking. However, the Council has also voted to update the rules governing ritual combat, and going forward, any species wishing to use bonded creatures or enhanced companions must register them with the Council in advance, and full disclosure of capabilities and nature of the bond must be provided, and this ensures fairness while allowing innovation. Kate nodded, and this seemed reasonable. I accept these terms on behalf of humanity. Carthon continued, and his ancient eyes studying Kate. The Council also wishes to acknowledge that humanity has brought new thinking to the galaxy, and your victory today has started important conversations about tradition versus progress, and about the nature of strength and cooperation, and the Velastron delegation proposes that Kate Morrison be appointed as a special advisor on interspecies relations and to help guide these discussions. This was unexpected, and Kate glanced at Patricia, who looked equally surprised but nodded encouragingly. I would be honored to serve the Council in this capacity. The chamber filled with the sounds of approval and discussion, and delegates from different species approaching to offer congratulations or to ask questions about the neural bond technology. And Kate answered as best she could while feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. Drathok approached, and his massive form towering over her. But his demeanor was respectful. You have done well, human. And you have won more than just territory today, and you have won respect and perhaps even friendship. Kate smiled up at him. I hope we can build on this, and I believe our species have much to learn from each other. The Carinth commander nodded. I have already spoken with your military leaders, and arrangements are being made for the cultural exchange. And 10 of our finest warriors will travel to Earth, and 10 of your soldiers will come here, and we will train together and learn together. Gregory stepped forward and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. This is a great honor, Commander, and I look forward to seeing what our species can accomplish together. Drathok looked at the offered hand and then grasped it carefully, and his clawed fingers engulfing Gregory's hand but being gentle enough not to cause harm. The Vrexan delegate approached, but his expression was not friendly. Do not think this changes the balance of power, human, and the Vrexan Empire remains the dominant military force in the galaxy, and your victory was clever. But cleverness alone will not protect you if we ever face each other in combat. Kate met his gaze calmly. I hope we never have to find out, and humanity seeks peace and cooperation, not conflict. The Vrexan snorted and walked away, and clearly unsatisfied but unable to challenge the Council's decision. Patricia pulled Kate aside as the crowd began to disperse. You need to contact Earth immediately, and they are waiting for news, and the entire planet is. Watching, Kate nodded and allowed herself to be led to a private communication room. And Patricia activated the quantum link that connected them instantaneously to Earth, despite the vast distance, and the screen flickered to life, showing the office of the Secretary General. Secretary Kim Lee appeared on screen, and her face anxious. Kate, and tell me you have good news. Kate smiled broadly. The Council upheld the results, and the Vega sector is ours, and humanity has been recognized as a legitimate power in galactic politics. Kim Lee closed her eyes in relief, and when she opened them again, there were tears there. You have done humanity a great service today, Kate Morrison, and history will remember what you accomplished. And the entire planet. Thanks you. The weight of those words settled on Kate's shoulders, and she realized that her life would never be the same after today, and she was no longer just a scientist and a soldier, and she was a symbol of what humanity could achieve. After the call ended, Kate returned to her quarters and dismissed everyone except her dragons, and she needed time alone to process everything that had happened. And Ember curled up on one side of her and Frost on the other, and she leaned against their warm scales and felt their presence in her mind. Through the window, she could see the alien city and the Carinth going about their lives under their orange sky, and somewhere out there other species were talking about what she had done and debating what it meant for the future. Kate thought about the genetic engineering program that had created her dragons, and thought about the protests and the politicians who had wanted to shut it down, and thought about all the scientists who had believed in the project and worked in secret to keep it alive. She thought about her parents who had encouraged her to pursue both science and military service, and thought about her training and all the years of preparation that had led to this moment. And she thought about the future and about what humanity might become now that they had proven themselves in the arena of galactic politics. Ember sent a question through the neural link and asking if she was happy. Kate smiled and sent back her answer, and yes, she was happy and proud and terrified and excited all at once. Frost projected calm wisdom as always, and reminding her that today was just one day, and that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Kate Morrison closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest, and she had fought and won and changed the galaxy in ways that were only beginning to be understood. And whatever came next, she would face it with her dragons beside her, and with the strength of humanity behind her. The sun set over the Carinth homeworld, and tomorrow she would begin her new role as advisor to the council, and tomorrow the cultural exchange would begin, and tomorrow humanity would take another step toward their place among the stars. But tonight, Kate Morrison allowed herself to simply be grateful for the bond she shared with Ember. And 6 months had passed since the duel, and Kate stood on the observation deck of the newly established joint human and Carinth training facility, orbiting between their two worlds, and watched as mixed teams of warriors practiced combat formations in zero gravity, and the sight still filled her with pride and wonder. Ember and Frost floated nearby, and their wings tucked close to their bodies in the weightless environment, and both dragons had adapted remarkably well to space training, and other species were already requesting information about neural bonding technology and wanting to develop their own programs. Commander Hunt approached and drifting smoothly through the station corridor, and he had spent the last 6 months overseeing the cultural exchange program, and the results had exceeded everyone's expectations. The third training cohort arrives next week, and he said as he grabbed a handhold near Kate, and we have applications from 17 different species wanting to participate, and the Thessians are particularly interested, and they think their existing cybernetic neural implants might be compatible with bonding technology. Kate smiled at the thought. That would be fascinating, and combining their speed with bonded creatures could create entirely new combat styles. And has anyone successfully replicated our neural interface yet? Gregory shook his head. The technology is more complex than most species realized, and the Velastran have made the most progress, but they are still years away from achieving the level of integration you have with Ember and Frost, and your bond remains unique in the galaxy. Through the viewport, Kate could see a Carinth warrior named Draka working with a human soldier named Corporal Amy Fletcher, and they moved in perfect synchronization in executing a combat drill that combined Carinth strength with human tactical thinking, and it was beautiful to watch. The Sala approached, and the young Carinth had become Kate's assistant, and helping coordinate the various programs that had emerged from the cultural exchange. The Galactic Council has sent a new request, and she said, and holding a data pad, and they want you to oversee a demonstration combat for the Vrexen delegation, and apparently, they are finally willing to admit that human methods have value, and they want to learn. Kate raised an eyebrow in surprise. The Vrexen? And 6 months ago, they were calling me a cheater, and now they want to learn from us. Thessala's eyes showed amusement. Pride is a difficult thing to overcome, but even the Vrexen cannot ignore the results we have seen, and the joint human and Carinth teams have won every training exercise against traditional single combatant units, and the numbers do not lie. Patricia Wells appeared from another corridor, and the ambassador had been spending most of her time at the facility and helping manage the political aspects of the expanding program. Kate, I have news from Earth, and the genetic engineering program has been fully reinstated and with government funding and support, and they want to create 3 more bonding facilities and train dozens of new handlers, and your success has changed public opinion completely. Kate felt mixed emotions at this news, and she was glad the program would continue, but worried about the implications of expanding too quickly. We need to be careful, and the bond between human and dragon is not something that can be mass-produced, and it requires genuine connection and compatibility, and not everyone who wants a dragon should have one. Patricia nodded seriously. The new Oversight Committee understands that, and they have asked you to help develop screening protocols and to ensure that only suitable candidates are selected, and they want your input on everything. A priority alert sounded through the station, and all personnel immediately moved to designated positions, and Kate felt Ember and Frost respond to her sudden tension, and the dragons moved closer and ready for whatever threat had emerged. The communications officer's voice came through the speakers. This is not a drill, and we have reports of a Vrexin assault ship attacking a civilian transport in the Deneb system, and the ship is carrying colonists from 3 different species, including humans, and they are requesting immediate assistance. Gregory was already moving toward the command center. How far away? 20 minutes at maximum speed, but the civilian transport only has 15 minutes of life support left after the attack damaged their systems. Kate made a decision instantly. Prep a fast response shuttle. And I am going. Patricia started to protest, but Kate cut her off. There is no time to argue. And I am the only one here with combat-proven experience using bonded dragons in real situations, and besides, this is exactly the kind of mission that shows what the human and Carinth alliance can accomplish. Zrathok appeared, and he had been visiting the facility to observe the training program. I will accompany you, and we will show the galaxy what our peoples can do together. Within 5 minutes, Kate and Zrathok were on a shuttle with Ember and Frost and racing toward the Deneb system, and 2 Carinth warriors and 3 human soldiers joined them in creating a mixed team that represented everything the cultural exchange had worked toward. The pilot pushed the engines to maximum, and the shuttle vibrated with the strain, but they needed every second Kate activated the neural link fully, and Ember and Frost's consciousness merging with hers, and she began planning the rescue operation. The Vrexin ship is military grade, and she said to the team, and they will have superior weapons and armor, and our advantage is speed and coordination, and we hit hard and fast and get the civilians out, and no heroics and no unnecessary risks. Zrathok checked his equipment. The Vrexin respect strength, and if we defeat them quickly, they may withdraw rather than fight to the death, but we must be prepared for either outcome. The shuttle dropped out of faster than light travel, and the scene before them was chaotic, and the civilian transport was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, and the Vrexin assault ship circled it like a predator, and occasionally firing shots that sent more debris spinning into space. Kate's tactical mind assessed the situation in seconds. The Vrexin ship has superior firepower, but our shuttle is more maneuverable, and Ember and Frost will exit through the airlock and approach from the ship's blind spot, and the rest of us will engage from the front and draw their attention. The pilot opened communications with the Vrexin ship. This is a joint human and Carinth rapid response team, and you are attacking civilians in neutral space, and cease fire immediately and withdraw. The Vrexin commander's response came through crackling with static and contempt. This transport carries criminals wanted by the Vrexin Empire, and you have no authority here, and leave now or be destroyed. Kate smiled grimly. Criminals and or refugees seeking asylum, and either way attacking civilians is illegal under galactic law, and this is your final warning. The Vrexin ship opened fire on their shuttle, and the pilot barely dodged the energy blasts, and Ember and Frost launched from the airlock, and their forms disappearing into the darkness of space. Kate coordinated the attack through the neural link, and she could see through her dragon's eyes as they approached the Vrexin ship from above, and the assault vessel's sensors had not detected them yet. The shuttle engaged directly and firing defensive weapons that were designed to disable rather than destroy, and creating a distraction while Ember and Frost reached their target. The red and blue dragons struck the Vrexen ship's engine pods simultaneously, and their claws had been enhanced to cut through ship hulls, and within seconds the assault vessel was dead in space and powerless and unable to fight or flee. Kate opened communications again. Your ship is disabled and your crew is unharmed, and surrender now, and face justice through proper channels, or continue resisting and face worse consequences along. Pause followed, and then the Vrexen commander's voice came back, and quieter now and defeated. We surrender. The rescue team quickly transferred the civilians from the damaged transport to safety, and Kate counted 47 people from 3 different species, including 12 human children who looked at her dragons with awe and wonder, instead of fear. A small girl named Sophie approached carefully. Are those real dragons? Kate smiled and knelt down to the child's level. They are very real, and their names are Ember and Frost, and they just saved everyone here. Sophie reached out tentatively, and Kate guided her hand to touch Ember's scales, and the red dragon rumbled softly and projected gentle thoughts through the neural link. When I grow up, I want to have a dragon too. Kate felt warmth spread through her chest. Maybe you will, and if you work hard and study and train, and maybe someday, you will bond with a dragon of your own. The mission was a complete success, and within hours the news had spread across the galaxy, and a joint human and Carinth team had rescued civilians and defeated a Vrexen assault ship without casualties on either side, and the demonstration of cooperation and effectiveness could not have been more perfect. Back at the training facility, Kate found herself surrounded by reporters and delegates and species representatives, all wanting to know more about the program and about neural bonding and about what humanity and the Carinth were building together. But what mattered most to Kate was not the political success or the growing reputation, and what mattered was the little girl who now dreamed of having her own dragon, and the future that was opening up for humanity, and for all species willing to embrace change and cooperation. That evening, Kate stood again on the observation deck and watched the stars and Ember and Frost beside her as always, and she thought about how far they had come since that first duel in the arena.